Good morning. Let's have a look again about the Romantic Age. In this case, we are going to talk about revolution and the reaction. If you want, you can take your book at page 310 and 311 and have a look at the things that we are going to say. In this period, between the 1776 and the 1837, there were a lot of revolutions in the world anyway, because before there was the French Revolution, then there was the independence of the American states. They were independent from Britain, and there was even another kind of revolution if we think about the industrial revolution, another industrial revolution that happened quite everywhere, but first of all in England, and the industrialization, so the growth of the cities and the rise of the new class of factory owners. So ordinary people left the land to find job in the cities, and a new working class had developed. At the same time, I was saying that in America and France there were other revolutions. In this period, the second part of the 18th century, Britain consolidated its own empire, building in India and the West Indies, in North America, but America declared the independence. In 1776, George Washington became the first president of the USA, and independent nation was born. American, French, and Industrial Revolution had a deep influence on all aspects of British culture and literature. Industrial Revolution generally refers to the economic and technological development from 1760s to the the middle of the 19th century, which transformed Britain from agricultural to an industrial country. Industrialization made and marked the change to powered machinery, factories and mass production. The steam engine played a central role. In this page, you've got a kind of map talking you about the literature during the Romantic Age, the history facts, and what happens in the society, the different changes that had developed during this period. Looking in this column, you've got the Industrial Revolution, just a summary of what happened in this period. During the Industrial Revolution, the power began to move from the landowning aristocracy to factory owners and other employers based in the cities. And the cities expanded rapidly. The new urban masses lived in conditions of terrible poverty, and the air was polluted by factories and the smoke they produced. The working conditions were really and extremely bad. People worked up to 16 hours a day, and young children were forced to work because they were paid less than adults and therefore preferred by the employers. In this period, there was a new kind of poetry, the Romantic poets, and in particularly the first generation of Romantic poets. They were Blake, William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the three first poets. William Blake wrote the Song of Innocence and the Songs of Experience. The first one, the Song of Innocence, was a poem about infancy, and it was written in a childlike way. Childhood represented not only a particular age, but also a state of the soul and innocent views of life. Songs of Experience is a collection of poems that describes man that cannot remain always a child, but has to grow and live the adult experience. The two works, the Songs of Innocence and the Song of Experience, contrast with one another, but at the same time they are complementary. In adult life is when people are selfish and incapable of spontaneity. The two states, innocence and experience, coexist in the human being and are essential part of the vital energy. The symbolism of these works is hard to decode, because it is based on the poet's own mystical and metaphorical systems. So it's not really far. One of the Blake's most famous dual symbolism in his poetry were the lamb and the tiger. They were two poems, okay? One, the lamb represented the innocence, and the contrast, it's not really a contrast, but it's the tiger, the animal. The lamb represents the innocence of childhood, and it represents the child that identifies with the infant Christ. The tiger is the force of good and evil, and beauty of creation, and the terror of destruction, which are impossible to separate. So there are the two different ways of seeing the things. And talking about Wordsworth and Coleridge, they were two poets that wrote, we are looking for the pages. And they were two different poets that together wrote the lyrical ballads. It was published in 1798, and the 4 poems were written from Coleridge, and 19 were written by Wordsworth. Here they describe the nature that was the central theme of Wordsworth's poetry. It was the expression of the ideal in the real, the mirror of the divine absolute. He describes natural landscapes, everyday life. But the second generation was represented by Byron, Shelley, and Keats. Byron was a really important poet. His poems are nowadays considered immoral, but they probably just referred to the poet's scandal affairs in his life. If you take your book at page 364, there is a short description about Percy Shelley and his life. In this part, in the central part, there is something about Mary Shelley Frankenstein, because Mary Shelley was his wife, and that is the explanation when she started writing Frankenstein. And the fact, I don't know where it is, here it is, the tragic death of John Keats that inspired him. And at the end, Shelley died just here when he was living here in San Terenzo. They were spending Mary Shelley and him, they were spending their summer in San Terenzo when he decided to have a trip by ship, just to meet, I think he was meeting Byron, who was in Tuscany, but he shipwrecked because there was a kind of tempest and he never came back. You can read it here at the end. Those are the most important romantic poets in the period, and I'm asking you just to read something about them and just know them. Don't read anything about their poetry or their works because they are too difficult, I think, to read alone. So we are maybe doing something together when we get back to school. You can find these things in your book anyway.